Emma sat on the edge of an old wooden dock, her bare feet dangling over the dark water of the lake. She was 10, and the summer sun beat down on her freckled shoulders. Next to her, her older sister, Laura, 4 years older, sat hugging her knees. Laura looked out at the water, but her eyes were empty, as if she were looking beyond the horizon. Emma knew that look it was the one she got when Laura thought about never being a mother. "Why are you sad?" Emma asked, fiddling with the hem of her faded sundress. Laura didn't answer right away. She pulled her knees closer to her chest and sighed. "The doctor told my mom I couldn't have kids. Ever. Something was wrong with my body." Emma frowned. She wasn't sure what that meant, but the pain in her sister's voice was real. "It's not fair," she said, clenching her fists. "You'd be a better mom." Laura smiled faintly, but it quickly faded. "Maybe I would have, but it doesn't matter. I won't have a chance." Emma looked at her sister, her long brown hair braided, and was determined that she would not let Laura suffer like this. She grabbed her hand, forcing Laura to turn around. "I will help you. When I grow up, I will give you a child. I promise." Laura laughed, but it was bitter. "Emma, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not that simple." "I don't care. I'll do it. I swear." Emma raised her hand like the knight in the books they'd read together. Her voice trembled with determination, and Laura smiled at her for the first time that day. "You're crazy," Laura said, hugging her sister. "But thank you." That day on the dock became sacred for Emma. The vow made in childhood was rooted in her heart like the old oak tree in their garden. She did not know that the words spoken in a fit of love would turn into a heavy burden years later. 20 years have passed. Emma, now a 30-year-old woman with short blonde hair and tired eyes, stood in the kitchen of her small house in the suburbs. She was chopping onions for dinner, and the radio was playing pop music softly. Liam, her husband, was not home from work yet. He was an engineer at a local construction firm, and his days were often long with drawings and meetings. Emma loved his calm, the way he could talk for hours about bridges and buildings as if they were alive. But today, her thoughts were far from Liam. Laura called that morning. Her voice on the phone was tense but familiar. "Emma, did you remember what you promised?" she asked, and Emma felt her stomach clench. Laura rarely reminded her of her vows, but each time it was like a blow. Emma knew her sister was waiting. Laura, now a successful lawyer, lived in a large house an hour away. She was married to Marcus, the owner of a construction company, a man Emma had only met a few times. He seemed too loud, too sure of himself, but Laura loved him. Or at least she said she did. Emma put down her knife and wiped her hands on her apron. She walked to the window, looking out at their small garden, where Liam had planted roses last year. Her vow to Laura had been a secret she kept even from her husband. Liam dreamed of children, of them running around this garden, but Emma always laughed it off, saying it was not time yet. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not now. The door slammed and Liam walked in, dusting his boots. His dark hair was tousled and his shirt was slightly wrinkled. He smiled when he saw Emma and dropped his briefcase on a chair. "Rough day?" she asked, turning back to her bow to hide her thoughts. "The usual," Liam replied, walking up to her. He hugged her from behind, nuzzling his nose into her neck. "You smell like onions. Romance." Emma laughed, but it was forced. "Go wash your hands, romantic. Dinner is soon." Liam walked to the sink, but paused, looking at her. "Are you okay? You look, I don't know, thoughtful." "Just tired," Emma lied, not meeting his eyes. "Laura called, asked me to come over this weekend." "Again, can't she live without you?" Liam said with a smile, but there was a hint of annoyance in his voice. He wasn't close to Laura, considering her too bossy. "She's my sister," Emma replied, a little more sharply than she intended. "She needs help." Liam shrugged and started washing his hands. "Okay, whatever. Just remember our weekend. I was thinking we could go to the lake." Emma nodded, but her thoughts were already with Laura. The vow she had made as a child now seemed not just a promise, but a duty she could not ignore. She knew that Laura was suffering. She knew that Marcus, despite his success, did not make her happy. And she knew that her own life with Liam quiet, comfortable, was about to change. The next day, Emma sat in the cafe across from Laura's office. Her sister walked in, as always, with perfect posture, wearing a formal gray suit. Her chestnut hair was pulled back into a neat bun, but the wrinkles around her eyes betrayed her fatigue. She sat down across from Emma, ordered a coffee, and got straight to business. "I talked to Marcus," Laura said, stirring her cup with a spoon. "He agrees. We're ready to begin." Emma felt her palms grow sweaty. "Start? You mean surrogacy?" Laura nodded. "I know it's a lot, but you promised, Emma. You're the only person I trust." Emma swallowed. She'd been expecting this conversation, but reality hit harder than she thought. "What if I can't? I mean, it's not just. It's a baby, Laura." Laura looked at her, and her eyes were the same as when she was a child on the dock, full of pain. "You can do it. I know you can. Marcus has already found a clinic. Everything will be legal. You'll just help me become a mother." Emma wanted to argue, to ask about Liam, about how it would change her life. But the words stuck in her throat. She saw the way Laura looked at her and remembered that day at the lake. The vow hadn't been just words. It had been her love for her sister. "Okay," Emma said quietly. "I'll do it." Laura squeezed her hand across the table. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." Emma smiled, but inside her heart sank. She knew there would be consequences to this choice, but she had no idea how severe they would be. As she sipped her cold coffee, her thoughts swirled around Liam, Laura, and the child she had promised her sister. The vow she had made as a child was now her destiny. If you liked the beginning, support it with a like and a subscription. And leave the city in the comments, then we'll see how geographically spread we are. Liam stood at the drafting table in his office, surrounded by the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the hum of an old fan. His office at the construction firm was small but cozy. The walls were covered with photographs of the bridges he'd helped design, and one framed image of Emma laughing at their wedding 5 years ago. Today, he was working on sketches for a new bridge over the river, but his mind was elsewhere. Emma had been acting strangely for the past few days, and it was bothering him. He put down his pencil and rubbed his temples. She had barely spoken at dinner last night, giving monosyllables as he explained his new project. Her eyes were elsewhere, and Liam didn't like it. He knew Emma, her habit of fiddling with her hair when she was nervous, her soft laugh when he joked. But now she seemed distant, as if an invisible wall had grown between them. Liam glanced at his watch. It was almost 6. He decided to finish early and surprise Emma. Maybe they could go to their favorite pizza place, or he could talk her into watching an old movie. He just wanted to make her smile again. At home, Emma sat on the couch, her legs tucked under her, her phone in her hands. She scrolled through the messages from Laura that had been coming in all day. "The clinic confirmed an appointment for next week," Laura wrote. "Marcus will be there. Are you ready?" Emma gripped the phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wasn't ready. Not quite. But it was too late to back out. Hearing the key turn in the lock, she quickly turned off the screen and threw the phone on the pillow. Liam walked in holding a bouquet of daisies, her favorite. "I decided to skip work early," he said, smiling. "This is for you. Thought we could use a little romance." Emma stood up, picked up the flowers, and inhaled their scent. "Thank you, Liam. They're beautiful." Her voice was warm, but there was tension in it. She placed the bouquet in the vase, avoiding his gaze. Liam took off his jacket and hung it over the back of his chair. "You're kind of quiet today. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's just." Laura called again, Emma said, heading into the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator, pretending to look for something to cook. "She wants me to come over for a couple of days. She has some business there." Liam followed her, leaning against the door frame. "Laura again? Emma, you spend so much time with her. When was the last time we did something together? Emma closed the fridge a little tighter than necessary. She's my sister, Liam. She needs my support. You know how hard it is for her. Liam nodded, but his face grew serious. I know, but I feel like you give her more than you give yourself. Or me. He paused, looking at her. We're still a team, right? Emma turned to him, and for a second her eyes softened. She loved Liam, his kindness, his patience. But the vow she'd made to Laura was like an anchor, pulling her in the other direction. Of course we're a team, she said, walking toward him and hugging him. Just give me some time, okay? Liam hugged her back, but his heart sank. He felt something slipping away, but he couldn't figure out what it was. The next morning, Emma sat in her car, heading to Laura's. Her sister's house was in a wealthy neighborhood where the streets were paved with cobblestones and the lawns were trimmed with surgical precision. Emma parked in front of a large white mansion with columns at the entrance. She was still getting used to the way Laura lived now, so different from their modest childhood home. Laura met her at the door, dressed in a silk robe, with a cup of coffee in her hand. You're early, she said, smiling. Marcus is still asleep. Let's go into the living room. Emma followed her sister, feeling her stomach clench. The living room was huge, with white couches and paintings on the walls that probably cost more than her car. She sat up, fiddling with the hem of her sweater. So, Laura began, sitting down across from him. I spoke to the doctor. They're ready to start the process. Marcus will hand in the material, and well, you know, they said it would be easier if we did it the old-fashioned way at home, without a clinic. Emma blinked. At home, you mean? With Marcus? Her voice wavered. Laura nodded as if it was a given. Yeah, it's quicker and cheaper. And frankly, Marcus doesn't want it all in the clinic. Too much paperwork. Emma felt her cheeks heat up. Laura, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I mean, it's weird. And Liam, he doesn't know anything. Laura put her cup down and leaned toward her. Emma, you promised. This isn't about you and Marcus. This is about me, my family. Liam doesn't need to know. You're not going to have a baby for yourself. Emma swallowed, looking at her sister. Laura was right, this wasn't about her. This was about the vow. But the thought of keeping it from Liam, of being so close to Marcus, terrified her. What if he finds out? Liam, I mean. You're smart, Laura said, her voice a little colder. You'll think of something to say. The main thing is that he doesn't interfere. Emma nodded, but her hands were shaking. She wanted to ask what if things went wrong, but Laura had already stood up, as if the conversation was over. Come on, I'll show you the room you'll be staying in when we get started. Emma came home that evening, feeling like she was carrying an invisible weight on her shoulders. Liam was in the kitchen, frying eggs. The smell of food filled the house, and for a second Emma felt safe. She walked over to him and hugged him from behind, burying her face in his shirt. Hey, what's wrong with you? Liam asked, turning around. He noticed her paleness. Are you sure you're okay? I just missed you, Emma lied, snuggling into him. How about we stay home tonight, just you and me? Liam smiled, clearly pleased. Sounds perfect. I won't even be for make you watch my stupid documentary about bridges. Emma laughed, but it was empty. They had spent the evening cuddled together on the couch, but Emma's thoughts were with Laura, with Marcus, with a vow she couldn't break. She knew that soon she would have to make a choice that would change everything. Emma woke to the sound of her alarm, but her eyelids were heavy, as if she hadn't slept at all. The conversation with Laura from the night before had been playing in her head all night, leaving a bitter aftertaste. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Liam snored quietly next to her. His hand was on her waist, and the touch, usually soothing, now felt like a reproach. She knew that today she would take the first step toward fulfilling her vow, a step that Liam would never understand. Emma carefully slipped out from under his arm and headed for the bathroom. Closing the door, she opened the medicine cabinet and pulled out a packet of birth control pills. Her fingers hovered over the package. She had been taking them for years, out of habit, to keep her life with Liam simple, predictable. But now everything is changing. Emma clutched the packet, feeling her heart pounding. "These are for Laura," she whispered to herself as she poured the pills into the toilet and flushed. The sound was deafening in the stillness of the morning. She returned to the bedroom, but Liam was already awake. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, rubbing his eyes. "You're early," he said, looking at her with a small smile. "Back to Laura's?" Emma nodded, pulling on her jeans. "Yeah, she asked for help with some paperwork. Nothing serious." Her voice was even, but inside she could feel the lie burning in her throat. Liam stood up and walked over to her, hugging her from behind. "You're taking on too much, Em. Maybe Laura should handle it herself. She's got Marcus." Emma tensed, but forced herself to smile. "Marcus is busy with his company, and Laura, she needs me." She turned and kissed his cheek, hoping it would distract him. "I'll be back for dinner, I promise." Liam sighed but nodded. "Okay, just don't forget about me, okay?" "Never," Emma replied, but her words sounded empty even to herself. By midday, Emma was in Laura's office downtown. Her sister's office was on the top floor of a glass skyscraper overlooking the river and bridges that Liam loved. Laura sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of paperwork, her phone buzzing with notifications. She looked collected, but Emma knew there was anxiety beneath the surface. "You're just in time," Laura said, without looking up from her laptop screen. "I've made arrangements with a lawyer. He's prepared all the paperwork for surrogacy. All we need is your signature." Emma sat down opposite him, feeling her palms getting sticky. "Papers? Already? I thought we'd discuss everything first." Laura looked up, her eyes hard. "Emma, we've discussed this 1,000 times. You've agreed. The sooner we start, the better. Marcus has already made up his mind." Emma swallowed. "What exactly am I signing? I mean, what will happen to the baby? And to me?" Laura leaned back in her chair, her voice softening. "It's simple. You carry the baby, give birth, and it becomes mine. You give up all rights, that's standard procedure. Marcus and I cover all expenses, and after the birth, you go back to your life. Nothing changes." "Nothing changes," Emma repeated, but the words felt like a lie. She wanted to ask about Liam, about how to explain her absence and her pregnancy. But Laura had already handed her a folder of documents. "Right here," she said, pointing to the signature line. "Read it if you want, but it's all standard stuff." Emma picked up the pen, her hand shaking. She scanned the text, but the letters blurred together. Words like renunciation of parental rights and legal liability scared her, but she couldn't show weakness. Not in front of Laura, not after the vows. "Are you sure this will work?" Emma asked, looking at her sister. "I mean, with Marcus. Without the clinic?" Laura nodded. "Marcus knows what he's doing. He doesn't want prying eyes. And I trust him. You should too." Emma gripped the pen tighter and signed. Her name looked foreign on the paper, like it belonged to someone else. She pushed the folder away, feeling her stomach clench. "Great," Laura said, putting the papers away. "Now we just have to get started. Marcus will be home tomorrow. Can you come?" Emma nodded, her thoughts in disarray. "Yes, I'll come." Laura smiled, but it was a businesslike, almost cold smile. "You make me happy, Emma. Thank you." Emma forced herself to smile back, but inside her heart was pounding. She stood up, muttering something about business, and walked out of the office, feeling the air in the hallway grow thick. That evening, Emma sat in her car in front of Laura and Marcus's house. She had arrived earlier than she had planned to gather her thoughts. The mansion looked even more impressive in the twilight, its windows glowing with a soft light. Emma gripped the steering wheel, looking at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were red, she had been crying on the way, but she couldn't say why. The door to the house opened, and Marcus stood there. He was tall, with dark hair and a smile that seemed both sincere and predatory. He wore a shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and he looked relaxed, like a man accustomed to being the center of attention. "Emma, what are you sitting there for?" he shouted, waving his hand. "Come in, don't be shy." Emma stepped out of the car, feeling her legs buckle. She forced a smile. "Just thinking. Where's Laura?" "At some meeting," Marcus answered, holding the door open. "You know she's always busy, but I'm here. Want a drink?" Emma shook her head. "No, thank you. I won't be long. I just wanted to discuss tomorrow." Marcus chuckled, closing the door behind her. "Discuss, huh? Relax, Emma. It'll be simple. You, me, a little biology. Nothing complicated." His tone made her tense. She walked into the living room, keeping her distance. "I just want this to be right. For Laura." "Oh, for Laura," Marcus said, pouring himself a whiskey from the bar. "Of course. We're all here for Laura, right?" He took a sip and looked at her, his eyes glittering. "But you know, Emma, this is about you and me too. A little. You don't mind having some fun, do you?" Emma froze. "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus laughed, setting his glass down on the table. "Oh, come on. Don't pretend. You signed the papers, you're in. We're going to be working closely. Really close." He took a step toward her, and Emma instinctively backed away. "Marcus, this is not a game," she said, her voice trembling. "This is for Laura, just for her." He raised his hands in surrender. Okay, for Laura. But think about it, Emma. We could make it more interesting." Emma felt her cheeks heat up. She turned toward the door. "I have to go. Tell Laura I'll be there tomorrow." Marcus watched her go, his smile never leaving his face. "See you tomorrow, Emma." Emma pulled the car to a stop in front of Laura's mansion, her fingers still wrapped around the steering wheel even though the engine had stalled. Dusk had settled over the house, and its white walls felt cold despite the warm light pouring through the windows. She sat staring at the front door, feeling her resolve melt away. Today was the day she was supposed to move in with Laura and Marcus to begin the surrogacy process. Her bag of clothes sat in the back seat, a few pairs of clothes, a toothbrush, a book she hadn't read in months. Everything she needed for a life that was no longer hers. She had lied to Liam that morning, saying that Laura needed help with a project and would be staying with her sister for a couple of weeks. Liam had frowned, but he hadn't argued. "Just stick around, Em," he'd said, kissing her before leaving for work. His words still echoed in her head, and every time she thought of his face, her chest tightened. Emma took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, grabbing her bag. The door to the mansion opened before she could knock. Laura was standing there, her hair slightly disheveled, holding a glass of wine. "You're here," she said, smiling. "I thought you'd change your mind." Emma forced herself to smile back. "I promised." She stepped inside, the scent of expensive candles filling her nose. The living room was as immaculate as the last time, but now it seemed even more foreign to Emma. "Marcus is in a meeting and will be back late," Laura said, leading her up the stairs to the second floor. "I've got a room ready for you. Nothing fancy, but you'll be comfortable." Emma nodded, following her sister. The room was small, with white walls and a bed covered with a gray blanket. The window looked out onto the backyard, where the pool was dark. Emma set her bag down, feeling like a guest in a house that would never be hers. "Thank you," she said, turning to Laura. I'm ready. When can we start?" Laura leaned against the door frame, her gaze growing serious. "Tomorrow. Marcus has everything set up. You know what to do. The main thing is not to get nervous. It's just biology." Emma swallowed, her hands clenched into fists. "Are you sure it's safe? Without doctors, I mean?" Laura sighed, as if the question irritated her. "Emma, we've talked about this. Marcus knows what he's doing, and I trust him. You should too." She paused, then added more gently, "This is my dream, Em. You make me happy." Emma nodded, but her throat tightened. She wanted to say that she was afraid Marcus had been weird last time, but the words stuck. Laura looked so vulnerable despite her confidence, and Emma couldn't let her down. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it right." Laura smiled and hugged her. "You're the best sister. Let's go have dinner. I ordered Thai food." Dinner passed in tense silence. Laura talked about her work, about some complicated case she was working on, but Emma was barely listening. Her thoughts were swirling about tomorrow, about Marcus, about Liam, who was probably home alone right now. She had texted him before dinner, "It's okay, Laura. Love you." But there had been no response yet. When they were done, Laura went into her office, saying she needed to check her email. Emma stayed behind to put away the dishes, glad for some routine. She was almost done when she heard the door open. Marcus walked in, his shirt slightly unbuttoned, holding a briefcase. "Oh, Emma, you're here," he said, his voice warm but mocking. "Settling in." Emma tensed as she placed her plate in the sink. "Yes, Laura showed me the room." Marcus came closer, too close, and leaned against the kitchen counter. His eyes raked over her, and Emma felt her skin crawl. "Okay? We have a lot of work to do, you and me. I think we'll get along." "It's not about us," Emma said, trying to keep her voice even. "It's for Laura." Marcus chuckled, pouring himself some water from the pitcher. "For Laura, of course. But you know, Emma, life isn't all about duty. Sometimes you can have fun." He took a sip, never taking his eyes off her. Emma stepped back, her heart pounding. "I have to go. Good night." She turned and walked quickly out of the kitchen, feeling his eyes on her back. In her room, she closed the door and leaned against it, trying to calm her breathing. Marcus was scaring her, not so much with his words, but with how easily he crossed boundaries. She pulled out her phone and opened the chat with Liam. His reply had come an hour ago. "Love you too. Miss you." Emma clutched the phone, feeling the tears sting her eyes. She wanted to call him, to tell him everything, but instead she texted, "Miss you too. Be right back." The next morning, Emma woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to gather her strength. Today was the day it would all begin. She took a shower, put on a simple t-shirt and jeans, and went downstairs. Laura was in the kitchen, drinking coffee, and Marcus was sitting at the table, reading something on his tablet. "Good morning," Laura said, smiling. "Are you ready?" Emma nodded, though her stomach clenched. "Yes. What should I do?" Marcus looked up, his smile barely noticeable. "No problem. You and I will go upstairs." Laura explained everything. Laura stood up, her movements jerky. "I'll be in the office. I have a meeting at 10. You'll handle it." She looked at Emma, her eyes full of gratitude, but also something else, fear, maybe. "Thanks, Em." Emma wanted to stop her, to ask her to stay, but Laura had already left. Marcus stood up, adjusting the sleeves of his shirt. "Let's go," he said, pointing to the stairs. Emma followed him, her legs feeling like lead. They entered a bedroom, not the one she lived in, but a different one, with a large bed and closed curtains. Marcus closed the door, and Emma felt her heart stop. "Relax," he said, his voice almost gentle. "It's just a process. It's nothing personal." Emma nodded, but her hands were shaking. She tried to think about Laura, about the vow, about how this wasn't about her and Marcus. But as he stepped closer, his hand touched her shoulder, and she involuntarily recoiled. "Emma, don't make this difficult," he said, his tone sharpening. "We both know why you're here." "I'm here for Laura," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Only for her." Marcus looked at her, his eyes narrowing. "Okay, for Laura's sake." Emma sat on the edge of her bed in her room at Laura's house, looking down at her hands folded in her lap. It had been a month since she'd moved here, and her life had settled into a strange rhythm, each day filled with tension and mystery. She was pregnant, a test last week had confirmed it. Emma hadn't told Laura yet, but she knew she would soon. She could feel the changes in her body, the slight nausea in the morning, the fatigue that came without warning. But what scared her most was the way Marcus looked at her, now like she was a trophy he was slowly taking. The morning began quietly. Laura had left for the office before dawn, leaving a note on the kitchen table. "Be back late. Good luck with Marcus." Emma crumpled the note and threw it in the trash, feeling a twinge of irritation. Laura had acted as if she was in control, as if Emma was simply doing a task and not sacrificing her life. But Emma reminded herself that this was for her sister, for the vow, and pushed the thoughts away. She went down to the kitchen to make coffee when she heard footsteps. Marcus walked in, dressed in his workout clothes, his hair damp from his morning run. He smiled when he saw her, and that smile, as always, was too confident. "Good morning, Emma," he said, opening the refrigerator and taking out a bottle of water. "You look tired. Didn't get enough sleep?" Emma shrugged, focusing on the coffee machine. "Just not a great night. It's okay." Marcus came closer, leaning against the counter next to her. His proximity made her tense, but she didn't show it. "You know, you need to relax," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "You take everything way too seriously. It's just nature, right?" Emma turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "It's not just nature, Marcus. It's a child. For Laura." He laughed, taking a sip of water. "Oh yeah, for Laura. But you and me, Emma, we're a team, right? We did this together." His tone was playful, but there was a hint of menace in it, as if he was reminding her that she was at his mercy. Emma clutched her mug so tightly that her fingers turned white. "I'm here for my sister, not for you." Marcus leaned closer, his face inches from hers. "Are you sure? Because I think you like being the center of attention. Laura's busy, Liam's away, and I'm here, and I see the way you look at me." Her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. "You're wrong," she said, stepping away from him. "I love Liam, and I'm only doing this for Laura." Marcus raised his hands in surrender, but his smile didn't fade. "Okay, okay. Don't be mad. I'm just telling it like it is." He paused, then added, "But if you change your mind, you know where to find me." Emma turned and walked out of the kitchen, her heart pounding. She hated the way Marcus was toying with her, the way he was turning her prey into some kind of dirty game. But the worst part was that she felt vulnerable, like he saw her weaknesses and knew how to exploit them. That afternoon, Emma sat in the living room, trying to read a book, but the words wouldn't form sentences. Her thoughts kept returning to Liam. She'd called him yesterday, but the conversation had been short. He'd been tired from work, and she couldn't find the words to fill the silence. Emma knew he felt her distance, and it was killing her. She wanted to tell him the truth, but how? "Liam, I'm pregnant, but it's not your baby, and it's for Laura." He'd never understand. The door opened and Laura walked in, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She looked exhausted, but her eyes lit up when she saw Emma. "You're still here," she said, throwing her bag on the couch. "I thought you were going to Liam's for the weekend." Emma closed the book, her fingers fiddling nervously with the cover. "No, I decided to stay. We need to finish this process." Laura sat down next to him, her face softening. "Did you take the test?" Emma nodded, her throat tightening. "Yes, I'm pregnant." Laura froze, then her eyes filled with tears. She grabbed Emma's hand. "Oh my God, Emma, are you serious? Is this true?" Emma forced a smile. "Yes, congratulations." Laura hugged her, her embrace tight, almost desperate. "You have no idea what this means. Thank you. Thank you for doing this for me." Emma hugged her back, but her heart was heavy. She wanted to be happy for her sister, but all she could think about was Marcus, his words, his look, and Liam, waiting for her at home, unaware that she was ruining their marriage. Laura pulled away, wiping away tears. "We should celebrate. I'll open the wine. Well, for me. You don't drink now, do you?" Emma shook her head. "No, and Laura, can I ask you something? Of course, Laura said, still beaming. Just keep an eye on Marcus, okay? He, he says weird things sometimes. Laura frowned, her smile fading. Weird? What do you mean? Emma hesitated, unsure of how to explain. It's just, he's too friendly. I don't want it to become a problem. Laura looked at her, her eyes narrowing. Emma, Marcus is like that. He flirts with everyone. It's his nature. But he loves me, and he knows it's all for the baby. Don't worry about it. Emma nodded, but her stomach clenched. Laura didn't see what she saw, or didn't want to see. That evening, Marcus returned home, bringing with him the scent of expensive cologne and energy that filled the entire room. He walked into the living room where Emma and Laura were sitting at dinner, and his face lit up with a smile. So, ladies, what's the news? Laura looked at Emma, then at Marcus. Emma's pregnant. We did it, Marcus. His eyebrows shot up, and he laughed, clapping his hands. Really? This is fantastic. He walked up to Emma, and before she could react, he pulled her into a hug, holding her a little longer than necessary. You're great, Emma. A real heroine. Emma tensed, but forced herself to smile. Thank you. Marcus sat at the table, his eyes shining. This must be celebrated. Laura, where is our best wine? Laura stood up to get the bottle, and Marcus leaned toward Emma. You know we're connected now, right? He whispered, so quietly that Laura didn't hear. It's our little secret. Emma pulled back, her heart pounding. There's no secret, she said, her voice firm. It's for Laura. Marcus just smiled, leaning back in his chair. Laura returned with the wine, and dinner continued, but Emma barely ate. She could feel Marcus watching her, his presence weighing on her. Laura, busy with her dreams of a child, noticed nothing, and this made Emma even more alone. Emma stood at the window of her room in Laura's house, looking out at the backyard where the dark water of the pool reflected the first stars. Another month had passed since she'd found out she was pregnant, and her body was increasingly reminding her of the new life inside her. Morning sickness was a constant companion, and fatigue washed over her in waves, making her feel like a shadow of her former self. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was watching her marriage to Liam slowly crumble and knowing that she was the one pushing him over the edge. She hadn't seen Liam in 2 weeks. Their calls were getting shorter, their messages less frequent. He'd texted her yesterday, "When are you coming back? I miss you." Emma had written back, "Soon, love you," but the words felt empty, as if they were written by someone else's hand. She wanted to go home, to hug him, to tell him everything, but every time she pictured his face, she was stopped by the thought of Laura, of the vow, of the child who was no longer just an idea, but a reality. Emma moved away from the window and lay down on her bed, pulling her knees up to her chest. Her phone was on the nightstand, the screen flashing with a notification from Laura. Doctor's appointment tomorrow. Ultrasound. Be ready by 9. Emma closed her eyes, trying to imagine Laura looking at the screen, her face lighting up with joy. But instead, she saw Marcus's smile, his gaze that haunted her every day. He didn't stop. His comments, his casual touches, his innuendos, it was all like poison, slowly eating away at her. He had crossed the line again at dinner last night. Laura had gone to answer a phone call, leaving them alone, and Marcus had leaned across the table toward her. "You look good, Emma," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "Pregnancy suits you." Emma had pulled away, her fork clanking against her plate. "Don't, Marcus," she had said, but he had only laughed, as if it were a joke. Laura had returned, oblivious, and dinner had continued, but Emma felt as if her skin was on fire. She knew she had to tell Laura, but every time she tried, the word stuck. Laura was so happy, so wrapped up in the dream of having a baby, that Emma was afraid she'd ruin it. And then there was a part of her, tiny but stubborn, that blamed herself. Was she overreacting? Was Marcus just like that, confident but harmless? But deep down, she knew the truth. Marcus was playing her, and she was trapped. That morning, Emma sat in Laura's car as they drove to the clinic. Laura was behind the wheel, her fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. "I'm so excited," she said, her eyes on the road. "This is the first ultrasound. We're going to see him. Or her. Can you imagine?" Emma nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, it will be." She wanted to share her sister's joy, but all she felt was a heaviness in her chest. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling a slight warmth. This child wasn't hers, but it was inside her, and that made everything more difficult. At the clinic, they were greeted by a nurse with a kind smile. Laura held Emma's hand as they walked into the office. The doctor, an older woman with gray hair, asked Emma to lie down on the couch and lift her shirt. The cold gel touched her skin, and Emma winced. Laura stood nearby, her eyes glued to the screen. When the image appeared, Laura gasped. "There he is," she whispered, squeezing Emma's hand. "My baby." Emma looked at the screen, a tiny speck, barely visible, but already alive. She felt her throat tighten. It was real. She was doing this for Laura, but the baby was a part of her, and the thought was terrifying. The doctor was explaining things about the heartbeat, about the timing, but Emma was barely listening. Laura was asking questions, her voice shaking with excitement. When they left the office, Laura hugged Emma so tightly that Emma found it hard to breathe. "You have no idea what you've done for me," she said, her eyes shining. "I'll never forget this." Emma smiled, but her smile was forced. "I'm glad you're happy," she said, and that was true, but only partly true. Back at the mansion, Emma went to her room to change. She had just taken off her jacket when she heard a knock on the door. Marcus walked in without waiting for an answer, his shirt unbuttoned to the top button, and in his hands he held a glass of something that smelled like whiskey. "Laura told me about the ultrasound," he said, closing the door behind him. "Congratulations, Emma. You're officially a heroine." Emma retreated to the window, her arms crossed over her chest. "Thank you, but it was Laura. I was just doing what I said I would." Marcus stepped closer, his smile too wide. "Oh, don't be modest. You're doing more than just fulfilling a promise. You're carrying my child. That bonds us, don't you think?" Her stomach clenched. "Marcus, stop. This isn't about us. This is about Laura." He laughed, setting his glass on the nightstand. Laura, you talk about her all the time. But let's be honest, Emma. You're here with me every day, and I can see how nervous you are when I'm around. It's not just a duty, is it?" Emma felt her cheeks heat up. "You're wrong. I love Liam, and I'm only doing this for my sister." Marcus leaned toward her, his voice quieter. "Liam, it's funny you remember him. Where is he now? Home, alone, while you're here with my baby in your belly. Think about it." Emma pushed him away, her voice shaking with anger. "Get out, now." Marcus raised his hands in surrender, but his eyes were shining. Okay, I'll leave. But you know where to find me when you change your mind." He walked out, leaving behind the smell of whiskey and a threat that hung in the air. Emma locked the door, her knees buckling. She sank to the floor, hugging herself. She hated Marcus, but she hated herself even more for letting him get this far, and for not being able to tell Laura, and for pulling away from Liam. That evening, she called Liam, unable to stand the silence any longer. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm but tired. Finally, I thought you'd forgotten about me." Emma clutched the phone, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry. There's just a lot going on. Laura's busy, and I'm helping her." Liam paused, then said, "You sound weird. Is something wrong?" She wanted to tell him everything about the pregnancy, about Marcus, about the vow that was ruining her life. But instead she said, "I'm just tired. Liam, let's go somewhere. For the weekend. Just you and me." His voice perked up. "Really? I thought you were tied to Laura. Maybe the lake? We haven't been there in ages." Emma smiled, feeling something like hope for the first time that day. Yes, to the lake. I'll come home tomorrow and we'll plan. Deal, Liam said. I miss you, Em. A lot. Me too, she said, her voice breaking. She hung up, tears streaming down her cheeks. She wanted to go back to Liam, to their simple life, but the child inside her, Marcus, Laura, all of it kept her here. The next day, she packed her bag and drove home. Liam met her at the door, hugging her so tightly she could barely breathe. They spent the evening planning the trip, laughing at old jokes, and for a few hours, Emma felt like her old self. But when Liam fell asleep, she lay next to him, staring into the darkness. She knew she wasn't going with him. Laura had texted her that morning. "We need to monitor the pregnancy. You can't leave." And Emma, as always, had complied. In the morning, she told Liam that Laura needed her help and the trip was postponed. His face darkened and he walked to the window, crossing his arms. "Emma, what's going on? You're always with Laura. I can barely see you. This isn't normal." "I know," she said, her voice quiet, "but she's my sister. She needs me." Liam turned to her, his eyes full of pain. "And me? I'm your husband too, or doesn't it matter anymore?" Emma opened her mouth, but no words came. She wanted to explain, but the lie she had been building for months was too heavy. "I'm sorry," was all she said. Liam shook his head and left the room. Emma was left alone, feeling their marriage crumbling. She was back with Laura, with Marcus, with a child who wasn't hers, but the vow that was supposed to save her sister was now destroying everything she loved. Emma sat at the kitchen table in Laura's house, her fingers fiddling nervously with the edge of her napkin. It had been 2 months since she'd called off the trip with Liam, and their marriage, once warm and secure, was now like cracked glass, still holding together but no longer whole. She'd seen Liam only once in that time, when she'd stopped by the house to pick up clothes. He'd been silent, his eyes avoiding hers, and Emma could feel the distance between them growing unbridgeable. Her pregnancy was progressing, it was visible now, the slight rounding of her belly that she hid beneath loose sweaters. Laura was ecstatic, Marcus was increasingly clingy, and Emma was increasingly lost. Today was a rare day when she decided to go home. Laura was away at a conference, and Marcus, to her relief, was busy with a business meeting. Emma wanted to see Liam, to talk, to try to mend what was left. She had texted him that morning. "I'll be home for lunch. Can we talk?" He texted her back, briefly. "Okay." The word, devoid of warmth, cut her, but she clung to hope. When Emma walked into their small house, the smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted her like an old friend. Liam was in the living room, sitting on the couch with his laptop on his lap. His dark hair was tousled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked as tired as she felt. "Hi," Emma said, setting her bag down by the door, her voice shaking despite her attempt to sound confident. Liam looked up, his face unreadable. "Hi, are you staying long?" Emma swallowed, sitting down in the chair opposite. "I wanted to talk. I miss you." He closed the laptop, but didn't smile. "Are you bored?" "Emma, you've been staying at Laura's for months. I can barely hear you. What's going on?" Her heart began to pound. She knew this conversation was inevitable, but she still wasn't ready. "I'm helping Laura. You know, she needs support." Liam shook his head, his voice sharpening. "Support? Emma, you're not a secretary or a nurse. You're my wife, or was. I'm not sure anymore." Emma looked down, her hands clenching in her lap. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. It's just, Laura's my sister. I need to be there for her." Liam stood up, his movements jerky. "Should? What about me? What about us? I feel like you're slipping away, and you're not even trying to explain why." He paused, looking at her. "You're pregnant, aren't you?" Emma froze, her breathing stopped. She looked up, meeting his gaze, full of pain and suspicion. "What makes you think that?" Her voice was barely audible. Liam pointed at her sweater, which couldn't quite hide her rounded belly. "I'm not blind, Emma, and I'm not stupid. Do you think I wouldn't notice? You avoid me, wearing those baggy clothes, but I see. Why didn't you tell me? Her throat tightened, tears stung her eyes. She wanted to lie, to say it was their baby, but the lie she'd spent months building crumbled under his gaze. Liam, it's not what you think. He stepped toward her, his voice shaking. Then explain, whose child is this? Because I know it's not mine. We haven't been together for months. Emma stood up, her hands shaking. This is for Laura. I'm a surrogate. For her and Marcus. She can't have children, and I promise to help her. That's all. Liam looked at her, his face white. A surrogate? You're pregnant with Marcus's child, and you were going to hide it from me? Are you serious? I couldn't, Emma said, her voice breaking. I knew you wouldn't understand. It was my promise to Laura ever since we were kids. I couldn't let her down. Liam laughed, but it was bitter, almost angry. You couldn't let Laura down? And me? You lied to me, Emma. You moved in with them, you're carrying his child, and you didn't even think to discuss it with me. How could you? Emma took a step toward him, holding out her hand, but he stepped back. Liam, please. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't affect us. Won't it? His voice grew louder. You ruined our marriage. You chose Laura, Marcus, this baby, everyone but me. I thought we were a team, Emma, but you did it behind my back. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she made no attempt to wipe them away. I love you. I did this to help my sister, but I never wanted to lose you. Liam shook his head, his eyes empty. Love? That's not love, Emma. That's betrayal. He turned and walked to the door, grabbing his jacket. I need to think. I can't be here right now. Liam, wait, she shouted, but the door had already slammed. Emma sank down onto the couch, sobbing, racking her body. She knew the truth would come out, but she didn't expect it to hurt so much. Liam was her anchor, her home, and now he was gone, and she didn't know if he'd come back. Emma returned to Laura's mansion late that evening, her eyes red from crying. Laura was in the living room, leafing through a magazine, but looked up when she saw her sister. Are you okay? You look terrible. Emma dropped her bag on the floor and sat down opposite him. Liam knows. He saw I was pregnant, and I told him the truth. He left. Laura frowned, putting the magazine down. Oh, Emma, why did you tell him? We agreed to keep this between us. Emma looked at her, her voice shaking with anger. Deal? Laura, he's my husband. He noticed I was pregnant. What was I supposed to do? Lie more? Laura sighed, her tone colder. You could have thought of something. Said it was your child, that you wanted to make it a surprise. Now he'll be interfering, and we don't need that. Emma clenched her fists. Interfere? Laura, this is my life. I'm ruining my marriage for you, and you're telling me he's interfering. Laura stood up, her eyes narrowing. You chose this, Emma. You made a vow to me. I didn't force you. And this baby, my baby, is more important than your family drama. Emma felt her heart squeeze. More important? Laura, I'm giving you everything. My marriage, my life. And you don't even see what he's doing to me. Laura froze. What do you mean? Emma swallowed, her voice quieter. He flirts with me. All the time. Says things he shouldn't. I asked you to watch him, but you didn't do anything. Laura laughed, but it was harsh. Flirting? Emma, that's Marcus. He's like that with everyone. You're overreacting. He loves me, and he knows it's for the baby. Emma stood up, her hands shaking. You're not listening. I'm telling you he's overstepping his bounds, and you just brush it off. I'm doing this for you, but I can't do this anymore. Laura stepped toward her, her voice hardening. Then what do you want? To leave? To leave me without a child? You signed the papers, Emma. You're in this until the end. Emma looked at her sister, her eyes filling with tears. I won't leave, but I don't know how long I can take this. She turned and walked into her room, leaving Laura in the living room. She closed the door and lay down on her bed, clutching her phone. Liam hadn't texted or called. She opened their old messages, reading his words of love, his plans for the future. It seemed distant now, like someone else's life. Marcus walked in without knocking, as if he knew she was alone. He leaned against the door frame, his smile almost sympathetic. "I heard you've had a hard day. Problems with your husband." Emma sat up, her voice cold. "Go away, Marcus. I'm not in the mood." He stepped closer, ignoring her words. "Oh, come on. You know you can talk to me. Liam doesn't understand what you're doing, but I do. You and we're special." Emma stood up, her anger flaring. "We're nothing special. You're using me, and I'm tired of pretending it's okay. Leave me alone." Marcus looked at her, his smile fading. "Okay, but you'll regret saying that." He walked out, leaving her in silence. Emma sat on a park bench near Laura's mansion, her hands clutching a paper cup of cold coffee. The cold November wind cut into her bones, but she didn't notice. Her thoughts were on Liam, his last words, the pain in his eyes as he left their home a week ago. He hadn't answered her calls or texted her since, and the silence between them was louder than any scream. Emma knew she had ruined their marriage, but she still clung to the hope that he would forgive her. That hope had died today. That morning, she received a letter. Not an email, but a real one in a white envelope, delivered by courier. The address was written in Liam's neat handwriting, and her heart sank as she opened it. Inside were divorce papers, several pages, cold and formal, with her name and his, asking for annulment of their marriage. Liam had signed them, leaving a blank line for her signature. Attached to the papers was a note. "Emma, I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." No blame, no explanation, just those words, cutting her like a knife. Emma dropped her cup into the bin and shoved her hands into her jacket pockets. Her belly, now visibly rounded by 5 months of pregnancy, felt foreign to her. She was carrying Laura's child, but the cost was becoming unbearable. Liam had been her anchor, her home, and now he was leaving, and she couldn't blame him. She had lied to him, hidden the truth, chosen her vow to her sister over their marriage. And yet the pain of his decision was so sharp Emma could barely breathe. She walked back into the mansion, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. Laura was in her office, engrossed in paperwork as usual. Marcus was thankfully absent. His car wasn't parked outside the house. Emma walked into her room, closed the door, and pulled the papers out of her bag. She laid them out on her bed, staring at the black letters that officially ended her life with Liam. Her fingers shook as she picked up the pen, but she couldn't sign. Not yet. There was a knock at the door, and Laura walked in without waiting for an answer. Her face was tense, but she smiled when she saw Emma. "You're back. I thought you were at Liam's. Is everything okay?" Emma clutched the papers, her voice hoarse. "Liam filed for divorce. He sent the papers today." Laura froze, her smile fading. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at Emma. "Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry, but maybe it's for the best. He didn't understand what you were doing for me. For us." Emma looked at her sister, her eyes flashing with anger. "For the better? Laura, I lost my husband. I loved him, and now he's leaving because I chose your dream over our life." Laura frowned, her voice hardening. "You made this choice, Emma. I didn't force you. You made a vow to me, and you knew it wouldn't be easy. Liam, he just couldn't accept the truth." Emma stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "Couldn't handle it. I lied to him for months. I moved here, I'm carrying Marcus's child, and I didn't tell him because you asked me to keep it a secret. And now you're telling me he just couldn't handle it." Laura stood up, her eyes narrowing. "Yes, Emma, I asked, because it's important. This baby is my only hope. Do you think this is easy for me? I see how much you're suffering, but you signed the papers. You're in this until the end." Emma felt tears sting her eyes. "Am I in this until the end? And then what, Laura? When the baby is born, what will I have left? No husband, no home, nothing. Laura stepped toward her, her voice softening. You'll have me, and the baby. You'll always be part of our family. Just be patient. A few more months, and it'll all be over. Emma shook her head, her voice breaking. It won't end. You can't see what's happening. Marcus, he won't stop. He says things, does things that scare me, and you just close your eyes. Laura sighed, her tone becoming irritated. Marcus again. Emma, I told you, he's like that. He flirts, it's his nature. But he loves me, and he knows it's for the baby. Stop being dramatic. Emma looked at her sister, her heart clenching. Laura didn't want to hear the truth, because the truth threatened her dream. Emma turned away, brushing away tears. I can't talk about this now. Leave me alone. Laura paused, then left, closing the door quietly. Emma lay down on the bed, clutching the papers in her hands. She knew she had to sign them, but every time she put pen to paper, Liam's face appeared before her eyes, his smile, his warm embrace. She couldn't let him go, even if he had already let her go. Later that evening, Marcus returned home. Emma heard his voice downstairs, his laughter as he spoke to Laura. She stayed in her room, not wanting to confront him. But Marcus, as always, found a way to invade her space. He knocked on the door and walked in without waiting for an answer, his shirt unbuttoned to the top, a bottle of beer in his hands. Laura told me about your husband, he said, closing the door. That's tough. Divorce is no joke. Emma sat up in bed, her voice cold. It's none of your business, Marcus. Go away. He chuckled, sitting down on a chair by the window. Oh, come on, Emma. I'm just trying to be supportive. You look like your world has fallen apart. Maybe I can help. Help? Her voice shook with anger. You've helped enough already. Your games, your hints it's because of you that everything has become worse. Marcus raised his eyebrows, his smile widening. My games? Emma, you're here. You chose to be here. And frankly, I think you like being the center of attention. Liam's gone, Laura's busy, and I'm always here. Emma stood up, her hands shaking. You're wrong. I hate this. I hate you. You're using me, and I'm tired of pretending it's okay. Marcus stood up, taking a step toward her. His face was serious, but his eyes were amused. Hate me? Ridiculous. You're carrying my child, Emma. You're bound to me whether you like it or not. And you know what? I think you're afraid to admit that you like it. Emma pushed him away, her voice breaking. Get out, now. Marcus looked at her, his smile fading. He raised his hands in surrender and walked out, leaving a heavy silence behind him. Emma locked the door, sobbing, racking her body. She hated Marcus, but she hated herself even more for letting it get this far. She was pregnant, alone, and now Liam was officially out of her life. The next day, Emma sat in the living room, staring at the divorce papers. Laura was at the office, Marcus was out of town, and the house was unusually quiet. She picked up her pen, her fingers shaking. She knew she had to sign, but every stroke felt like a betrayal not just of Liam, but of herself. She remembered their wedding, their first home, their dreams for the future. All of it had been destroyed by her vow, her lies, her weakness. She signed the papers, her signature uneven, alien. Tears fell onto the page, but she didn't wipe them away. She folded the documents into an envelope and mailed them to Liam's lawyer, feeling a part of her heart die. Liam was free, and she was trapped in Laura's house under Marcus's gaze with a child who would never be hers. Emma went back to her room and lay on her bed, clutching her phone. She opened old photos of her and Liam, the trip to the lake, their first New Year, his smile against the sunset. She wanted to call him, to beg him to come back, but knew it was useless. Instead, she texted Laura, Liam filed for divorce. I signed the papers. I need time. Laura responded an hour later, I'm sorry, Em, but you did the right thing. We're almost there. Emma threw the phone on the bed, her eyes empty. She had done the right thing for Laura, but for herself, it was all wrong. Emma sat in her room at Laura's mansion, staring at the blank wall across from her bed. It had been a month since she'd signed the divorce papers, and the pain of losing Liam hadn't abated. She felt it every day, sharp as a knife, but dull as an old scar. She was now 6 months pregnant, and the baby inside her was no longer just an idea, but a living thing she could feel every time it moved. Emma tried not to think of it as hers. It was Laura's baby, her duty, her vow. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she'd put her hand on her belly and whisper, "I'm sorry," not knowing if she was talking to the baby, Liam, or herself. The mansion that had once seemed cold to her now felt like a prison. Laura was consumed with her work and her dreams of her future child, spending her days in the office or in meetings with doctors. Marcus, on the other hand, was too close, a presence in every corner of the house. His manipulations became more and more overt, and Emma learned to avoid him, but she didn't always succeed. Yesterday, he caught her in the hallway as she returned from the kitchen, and his hand lingered on her shoulder longer than necessary. "You look lonely, Emma," he said, his voice soft but his eyes predatory. She broke away with a mumbled word and locked herself in her room, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell Laura, but every time she tried, her sister brushed her off, accusing her of being overly sensitive. Emma felt invisible, her pain and fear dissolved in Laura's dream of a child. Laura came home earlier than usual today. Emma heard her heels clicking on the marble floor and a voice calling her from the living room. "Emma, come down. I want to show you something." Emma sighed, put down the book she hadn't read anyway, and went downstairs. Laura was standing by the couch, holding a stack of baby clothes, tiny onesies, hats, socks, all in pastel colors. Her face was glowing, as if she were holding not fabric, but life itself. "Look how cute they are," Laura said, laying out the clothes on the couch. "I couldn't resist buying them on sale. I can just picture the baby wearing them." Emma forced herself to smile, but it was tight. "Beautiful. Have you picked a name yet?" Laura nodded, her eyes shining. "If it's a girl, Sophia. If it's a boy, maybe James. What do you think?" "Sophia, that's sweet," Emma replied, sitting down next to her. She wanted to share her sister's joy, but all she felt was emptiness. Her own life was in ruins, and Laura seemed oblivious to anything but her future. Laura folded her clothes and looked at Emma. "Are you okay? You've been so quiet lately." Emma clasped her hands in her lap, her voice steady, but inside she was screaming. "I'm just tired. Pregnancy, it's hard." Laura leaned toward her, her hand touching Emma's shoulder. "I know. You do so much for me. I'll never forget that, Em. You're my hero." Emma nodded, but Laura's words brought no comfort. She wanted to tell her about Marcus, about his words, about how he was making her life miserable. But Laura looked so happy, so vulnerable, that Emma couldn't ruin the moment. Instead, she said, "I'm glad you're happy. That's all that matters." Laura smiled and hugged her. "You're the best, sister. Come on, I'll order dinner. We deserve something tasty." Dinner was quiet, but the air was tense, like a storm about to begin. Marcus joined them, bringing his usual energy, his loud laugh, his smile too bright. He sat across from Emma, his eyes darting to hers as she tried not to look in his direction. Laura talked about her day, the new case she'd taken, but Emma was barely listening. Her thoughts were on Liam, on the divorce papers, on the child who tied her to this house. As Laura went to answer the phone, Marcus leaned across the table, his voice low. "You're quiet today, Emma. Still worried about your husband." He chuckled, taking a sip of wine. "Oh, come on. I just want to help. You know I'm always here. And honestly, Liam wasn't worth you. You deserve someone stronger." Emma looked at him, her eyes flashing. "Stop it. I'm tired of your games. Leave me alone." Marcus raised his eyebrows, his smile widening. "A game? Emma, this isn't a game. You and I are connected. This baby is ours. And I see the way you look at me when you think I don't notice." Her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. She stood up, her voice shaking. "You're wrong. I hate you. And this child isn't ours. It's Laura's." Marcus opened his mouth to answer, but the door opened and Laura returned. She stopped, looking at them. "What's going on?" Emma froze, her heart pounding. She wanted to tell her everything about how Marcus was stalking her, how he was making her life a living hell. But the words stuck, and she simply shook her head. "Nothing. I'm just tired. I'm going to bed." Laura frowned but nodded. "Okay. Good night." Emma retreated to her room, feeling Marcus's gaze on her back. She locked the door, her body shaking. She knew she couldn't stay silent any longer, but the fear of ruining Laura's dream was stronger than her anger. She lay down on her bed, clutching her phone, and opened an old text from Liam. "I will always love you, but I can't do this." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. Liam was lost, Laura was blind, and Marcus was becoming more and more dangerous. Emma felt like she was drowning, and she didn't know how to get out. The next day, Laura sat in her office, her fingers tapping on the table. The conversation over dinner kept playing in her head. She could see the tension between Emma and Marcus, but she didn't want to believe it was more than her imagination. Marcus was her husband, the man who had promised her a family, who had supported her dream of having a child. But Emma's words, "He says things, does things that scare me," played in her head like a persistent melody. Laura opened her laptop and began scrolling through photos of them together, the wedding, the beach vacation, dinners with friends. Marcus was always the center of attention, his charisma drawing people in like a magnet. She loved him for it, but now she wondered what was behind his smile. She remembered him flirting with the waitresses, joking with her coworkers, the occasional lingering hand on someone else's shoulder. Laura had always brushed it off, telling herself it was just his nature. But now, looking at Emma, her tired eyes and trembling hands, she began to doubt it. Laura closed her laptop and picked up her phone. She dialed her friend Claire, a lawyer who had known Marcus since college. "Claire, I need to talk," Laura said when her friend answered. "About Marcus. Have you ever noticed anything strange about him?" Claire paused, then her voice became cautious. "Weird. Laura, Marcus, he's always been slippery. Charming, but slippery. I heard rumors even before you got married. Nothing serious, but he likes attention, especially from women." Laura clutched the phone, her stomach clenching. "Rumors? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were in love," Claire replied, "and I didn't want to ruin your happiness. But if you're asking, be careful. He's not who he says he is." Laura hung up, her hands shaking. She didn't want to believe Claire, but Emma's words, her fear, her pain, it all added up to a terrifying picture. Laura knew she had to talk to Marcus, but the fear of what she would find paralyzed her. She stood, looking out the window at the city, and for the first time in months, she felt like her dream of having a child might be coming at too high a price. Laura returned home that evening to find Marcus in the living room. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, his shirt unbuttoned as usual. Emma was in her room. Laura heard her close the door as Marcus entered. "We need to talk," Laura said, sitting down opposite him. Her voice was firm, but inside she was shaking. Marcus looked up, his eyebrows raised. "Wow, that's a serious tone. What's wrong, dear?" Laura swallowed, her eyes narrowing. "Emma, she says you're acting weird, flirting, crossing boundaries. Is that true?" Marcus laughed, putting his phone down. "Flirting? Laura, you know me. I'm kidding, I'm friendly. Emma's just too sensitive. She's going through her divorce, that's all." Laura leaned forward, her voice sharper. "Don't lie to me, Marcus. I see what she looks like. She's afraid of you. What are you doing?" His smile faded, and he looked at her, his eyes cold. "Are you scared? Laura, this is ridiculous. She's carrying our baby. I'm just trying to be supportive. If she gets it wrong, that's her problem." Laura clenched her fists, her voice shaking. "Supportive. Marcus, if you do something that scares my sister, that's my problem, and I'm not going to let you ruin that. Marcus stood up, his face dark. Destroy? Laura, I gave you everything. This house, this child, this life, and you blame me because of some paranoia of your sister's. Maybe you're the one destroying everything. Laura stood up, her eyes filling with tears. I want to believe you, but I'm not blind. And if Emma is right, if you're playing with her, I won't forgive you. Marcus looked at her, his lips pressed into a thin line. Do what you want, Laura, but don't forget who's in charge here. He walked out, slamming the door, and Laura was left alone, feeling her world crumble. She went up to Emma's room and knocked. Emma opened it, her face was pale, eyes red. Laura, what happened? Laura stepped inside, her voice quiet. I talked to Marcus. I'm starting to think you're right. I need time to figure this out. But I don't want you to suffer. I'm sorry I didn't listen. Emma looked at her, her eyes filling with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Emma lay in the hospital bed, her breathing heavy and her body clammy with sweat. The delivery room was brightly lit, and the sound of the monitor tracking the baby's heartbeat filled the space. The pain came in waves, each one worse than the last, and Emma clutched the railings of the bed, trying not to scream. Laura stood next to her face pale but her eyes ablaze with a mixture of fear and hope. She held Emma's hand, whispering, You can do it, Em. You almost did it. 3 months had passed since Laura had first suspected Marcus. Emma was 9 months pregnant, and her pregnancy, despite all the difficulties, was proceeding without complications. But her life was far from calm. Marcus had become more cautious since his argument with Laura, but his presence still weighed heavily on Emma. He no longer flirts openly, but his glances, his casual comments, his smile, all of it reminded her that he had not retreated, but was simply waiting. Laura, on the other hand, had become more attentive. She asked Emma more often how she was feeling and tried to keep Marcus at a distance, but her own fears about her future marriage prevented her from acting decisively. Emma sensed that Laura was torn between her love for Marcus and the truth she did not want to accept. Now, in the delivery room, it all seemed distant. The pain erased her thoughts, leaving only the instinct and the goal of delivering a child. The midwife, a woman with a warm smile, checked her condition and said, Just a little bit more, Emma. You're ready to push. Emma nodded, her throat dry, her eyes full of tears. She knew this moment would change everything for Laura, for her, for the baby she'd carried for 9 months. Laura squeezed her hand tighter. I'm here, Em. You're doing this for me. Thank you. Her voice shook, and Emma could see tears in her eyes. She wanted to answer, but another contraction made her grit her teeth. Push, Emma, now, the midwife commanded. Emma gathered all her strength, her body tensed, and she screamed, pushing the baby out into the world. Time stood still, the pain peaked, and then there was silence, broken by a thin, piercing cry. A girl, the midwife announced, lifting the tiny creature, slimy but alive, real. Emma fell back against the pillows, her breathing ragged, her eyes wide. She looked at the baby, her tiny hands clenched into fists, and felt her heart break. It was Sophia, the name Laura had chosen months ago. Laura gasped, her hands shaking as the midwife handed her the baby, wrapped in a soft blanket. Oh my God, Emma. She's beautiful, Laura whispered, her voice full of awe. She held Sophia to her chest, her tears dripping onto the blanket. Thank you. Thank you for giving her to me. Emma watched them, her chest tightening with mixed emotions. She had kept her vow. Laura was a mother, Sophia was here. But in that moment, she felt empty, as if part of her was left with a child who would never be hers. She knew she had signed the papers, given up her rights, but the reality of it hit harder than she expected. The midwife helped Emma sit up with pillows. You're doing great, she said, her voice warm. Want to hold her? Emma froze, her eyes darting to Laura. She wanted to say yes, wanted to feel Sophia's warmth, but fear stopped her. This wasn't her baby. She had no right. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. This is Laura's. Laura looked at her, her face softening. Emma, you can. She's a part of you too. She carefully handed Sophia to Emma, who, unable to resist, took the child. Sophia was light, her eyes closed and her lips moving slightly. Emma felt tears running down her cheeks. She held her for only a few seconds, but it was enough to know how hard it would be to let go. "You're so beautiful," she whispered, handing Sophia back to Laura. Her hands were shaking and her heart ached. Laura held Sophia close, her eyes never leaving the child. "I'll never forget what you did, Em. Never." Emma nodded, but her smile was weak. She had kept her vow, but the price was higher than she could have imagined. Liam was gone, her marriage was ruined, Marcus had poisoned her life, and now she had lost even this tiny connection to Sophia. She felt like an empty shell, existing only for others. After the birth, Emma was moved to a recovery room. Laura stayed with Sophia in the next room, where the nurses taught her the basics of newborn care. Emma lay alone, staring at the ceiling, her body weak, her thoughts chaotic. She tried to focus on what she had done for Laura, but all she could think about was Liam. She pulled out her phone and opened their old messages, but she didn't write. What could she say? "I had a baby, but not for us." He wouldn't answer. He shouldn't have. The door opened and Marcus walked in. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, but his smile was there as always. Emma tensed, her hands clenching on the blanket. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. Marcus closed the door and leaned against the wall. "I came to congratulate you. Laura said everything went well. A girl, huh? Sophia, a good name." Emma looked at him, her eyes narrowed. "Congratulations. Now go." He chuckled, stepping closer. "Oh, come on, Emma. You did a great job. I thought we could celebrate, you and I, like old times." Her stomach clenched, anger flaring. "The good old days. Are you serious? You've made my life hell, Marcus. Go away." Marcus looked at her, his smile fading. "You're always so mean. I just wanted to be friendly. But you know what? You're no longer needed. The baby's born, Laura's happy. You can go back to your miserable life." Emma clenched her fists, her voice shaking. "I hate you, and I'll tell Laura everything. About your words, your touch, your threats." Marcus laughed, but it was a cold laugh. "Tell me, and what will she do? She loves me, and you're just a means to an end. Think about it." He turned and walked out, leaving her in silence. Emma closed her eyes, her tears soaking into the pillow. She knew Marcus was right about one thing: Laura loved him, despite her doubts. But she also knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. She had to protect herself, even if it meant destroying Laura's illusions. The next day, Laura walked into the room holding Sophia in her arms. She looked tired but happy, her eyes shining as she looked at her daughter. "Emma, how are you? The doctor said you'll be discharged soon." Emma sat up, her voice weak. "I'm fine. How's Sophia?" Laura smiled as she looked at the baby. "She's perfect. She eats, she sleeps, she's just like she should be. I still can't believe she's mine." Emma nodded, but her heart sank. She knew this was the last moment she could be honest. "Laura, we need to talk. About Marcus." Laura frowned, her smile fading. "Again? Emma, you just gave birth. Maybe not now?" Emma shook her head, her voice firmer. "No, not now. He was here yesterday. He said I wasn't needed anymore, that the baby was born and I could go. But that's not all. He kept trying. He made me his plaything, Laura. I told you, but you wouldn't listen." Laura froze, her arms tightening around Sophia. "What do you mean? He touched you?" Emma swallowed, her eyes filling with tears. "Not in the way you think, but his words, his behavior. He wanted me to feel weak, dependent. He threatened me, Laura, and I can't stay silent any longer." Laura looked at her, her face white. "Why didn't you tell me before? I thought you were exaggerating." Emma shook her head. "I tried, But you didn't want to hear it. You were so happy with the baby, with Marcus. I didn't want to ruin it. Laura looked down at Sophia, her lips trembling. I didn't know. I have to see. Sorry, Emma. Emma reached out, touching her shoulder. It's not your fault, but you need to know the truth. He's not who he says he is. Laura nodded, her eyes filled with tears. I'll figure it out, I promise. She stood up, still holding Sophia, and walked out, leaving Emma alone. Emma sat on the bed in her room at Laura's mansion, her hands in her lap, her gaze fixed on the suitcase by the door. It had been a week since she'd given birth to Sophia, and her body still ached, a reminder of what she'd been through. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emptiness that had settled in her chest. She'd kept her vow to give Laura a child, but she'd lost Liam, her place in the world, and, she felt, a part of herself. Now that Sophia was with Laura, Emma felt like a redundant tool, a tool that had served its purpose and could now be set aside. Laura had changed since their conversation at the hospital. She was quieter, her eyes more thoughtful, her smiles less often. Emma could see her sister struggling with the truth about Marcus, but Laura hadn't shared her plans yet. She spent all her time with Sophia, learning how to change diapers, feed her, and soothe her cries. Emma tried to keep her distance, not to interfere, but every time she heard Sophia's quiet cries, her heart sank. She had no right to her, but the connection she felt was not gone. Marcus, to her relief, was busy. His construction company had won a big contract, and he was away in meetings all day. But his presence was still there in the house, in his things, in his smell, in the way Laura tensed when he returned. Emma knew Laura had promised to look into it, but nothing had happened yet, which made her feel even more vulnerable. This morning, Laura knocked on her door, her face serious. Emma, we need to talk, she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Emma nodded, her stomach clenching with anticipation. She had expected Laura to want to discuss Marcus, but her sister's words were different. I'm leaving, Laura said, her voice quiet but firm. I'm taking Sophia and leaving. To another city, maybe even a state. I haven't decided where yet, but I can't stay here. Emma froze, her eyes widening. Leaving? Why? Because of Marcus. Laura looked down at her hands, her fingers fiddling nervously with the hem of her sweater. Yes, and more. I talked to him after the hospital. He denies everything, says you're exaggerating, that you're just unstable after the divorce. But I see the way he looks at you, Emma, and I remember other things, his calls, his late arrivals, his flirting. I can't pretend everything's okay anymore. Emma swallowed, her voice hoarse. Do you believe me? Laura looked up, her eyes full of tears. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't believe you before. I was so caught up in Sophia, in my dream, I didn't want to see the truth. But now I do, and I can't leave Sophia in this house with him. Emma nodded, her heart clenching. She was glad that Laura finally understood, but her sister's words meant that she would lose not only Sophia, but also Laura, the last connection that kept her afloat. When are you leaving? She asked, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. In a week, Laura replied. I've already hired a lawyer. He's preparing the divorce papers. I'll take some of Marcus's assets enough to start a new life. I don't want him to know where we've gone. It'll just be me and Sophia. Emma felt her eyes fill with tears. And me? Laura, I did this for you. What will happen to me? Laura reached out, touching her shoulder. You'll always be my sister, but you need to start over, Emma. You've lost so much Liam yourself. I don't want you to stay in this mess. You need to leave, find your way. Emma shook her head, her voice breaking. Find a way? Laura, I have nothing. No home, no husband, no. Nothing. I gave it all up for you. Laura squeezed her hand, her voice full of pain. I know, and I can never repay you for this. But staying here with Marcus, with these memories, is not living. You deserve better. Emma turned away, her tears falling onto her knees. She knew Laura was right, but the truth cut like a knife. She had kept her vow, but she was left with nothing. Laura would leave with Sophia, and Emma would be alone in the void she had created. That evening, Emma sat in the living room, looking at the boxes Laura had started to pack. Sophia was asleep in the crib in the corner, her tiny fists clenched. Emma looked at her, feeling her heart break. She had no right to love her, but she couldn't stop herself. Every time she saw Sophia, she remembered the pain of giving birth, the warmth of her body, the moment she held her in her arms. It was fleeting, but unforgettable. Marcus walked in, his steps heavy. He paused, looking at the boxes, his face dark. "What is this?" he asked, his voice sharp. Laura came out of the kitchen, her posture straight, but her eyes wary. "I'm leaving, Marcus. With Sophia, we're getting a divorce." Marcus laughed, but it was a cold laugh. "Divorce? Seriously? Because of what? Because of your sister and her fantasies?" Laura stepped toward him, her voice firm. "Don't lie to me. I know what you did to Emma. Your words, your games. I'm not blind, and I won't let Sophia grow up in this house." Marcus looked at Emma, his eyes narrowing. You turned her against me. You were always the problem." Emma stood up, her voice shaking but full of anger. "Me? You did this to yourself, Marcus. You used me, scared me, and now you blame me? You're pathetic." Marcus took a step toward her, but Laura stepped between them. "Don't you dare go near her," she said, her voice like steel. "You don't control us anymore. Go away." Marcus looked at Laura, his face twisted in rage. "You'll regret this. Both of you. I won't let you take everything that's mine." Laura didn't back down. "Try it. My lawyer is already at work. You'll lose more than you think." Marcus clenched his fists, but turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. Emma felt her knees buckle and sank down onto the couch. Laura sat down next to him, her hands shaking but looking determined. "Are you okay?" Laura asked, looking at Emma. Emma shook her head, her voice weak. "I don't know. I'm glad you're leaving him. But I don't know what to do now." Laura hugged her, her voice soft. "You'll find yourself, Em. I believe in you, but I can't take you with me. Not now. I need to protect Sophia to start over, and you need the same." Emma nodded, her tears soaking into Laura's shoulder. She knew her sister was right, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Laura would leave, taking Sophia and a piece of her heart, and Emma would stay behind to pick up the pieces of her life. A week later, Laura left. Emma helped her pack the last of her things, trying not to look at Sophia for too long. They didn't hug goodbye. Laura simply squeezed her hand and said, "I'll call when I'm settled. Thanks, Emma, for everything." Emma nodded, her throat too tight to respond. Laura's car disappeared around the corner, leaving Emma alone in front of the mansion. She went back to her room, packed her things, just one bag, like the day she arrived. Marcus didn't show up, and she was grateful for that. She knew he wouldn't give up easily, but this wasn't her fight anymore. Emma sat in her car, looking out at the empty road. Laura was gone, Sophia was gone, Liam was gone. It had been a day since Laura had left with Sophia, and the silence that remained in the house was deafening. Her bag, filled with clothes and a few personal belongings, lay in the back seat, all that was left of her life here. She knew she had to go, but something held her, as if she was waiting for permission to leave this place that had taken so much from her. Marcus hadn't shown up since their last fight, and that was the only relief. But Emma knew he would come back, and she didn't want to be here when he did. Her phone vibrated, startling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Laura. "We're safe. The lawyer is working on the divorce. Don't tell Marcus anything. Thanks, Em." Emma clutched the phone, her eyes filling with tears. Laura was okay, Sophia was with her, and that should have brought her joy. Instead, Emma felt nothing but emptiness. She'd kept her vow, but she'd lost everything: Liam, her sister, the baby she'd carried for 9 months, and, it seemed, herself. She started the engine, but didn't move. Where was she going to go? The house she shared with Liam was now his alone. The divorce was final, and she couldn't go back there. She had no job, no plan, just a vague desire to get away from everything that had happened. Emma took a deep breath and pulled out onto the road, heading for the only place she could think of her parents. She didn't know if they would take her back after all this, but she had no other choice. The mansion was behind her, but Marcus's shadow still haunted her. Emma hadn't seen him since the day Laura announced she was leaving, but his words, "You'll regret it," echoed in her head. She knew he wouldn't give up easily. His construction company, his money, his power, it was all part of his identity, and losing Laura, Sophia, and some of his assets would hit him harder than he let on. Emma hoped Laura's lawyer would do his job quickly, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus would find a way to get revenge. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his downtown office, his fingers drumming on the glass table. The room was luxurious leather chairs, picture windows, paintings that cost more than his staff's annual salaries. But today, he had no pleasure in the luxury. Laura had left, taking Sophia, and worse, his lawyer had informed him that she had filed for divorce, demanding half of his assets. Marcus clenched his fists, his face darkening. He had built this empire from scratch, and the thought of Laura, egged on by Emma, taking it all away from him infuriated him. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant, Caitlin, the young woman who had worked with him for the past 6 months. She was ambitious, beautiful, and most important, she admired him. "Caitlin, come in," he said, his voice sharp. Caitlin walked in a minute later, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She was wearing a form-fitting dress, her smile both professional and flirtatious. "You called, Marcus?" He leaned back in his chair, looking at her. "Yeah, I need you to make a few calls. Find me the best divorce lawyer. I'm not going to lose everything because of Laura." Caitlin nodded, taking notes on her notepad. "Sure. Anything else?" Marcus smiled, his eyes running over her. "Yeah, stay after work. We need to discuss strategy." Caitlin smiled back, her gaze meaningful. "Whatever you say, boss." Marcus watched her go and felt a small wave of relief. Laura was gone, Emma was no longer a problem, and Caitlin was here, ready to take their place. He had lost his family, but he was not about to lose control. Emma, Laura, Sophia, they were part of the past. Now he was looking forward to it, and Caitlin was his new beginning. Emma parked in front of her parents' house, a modest two-story cottage in the suburbs. Her heart was pounding as she got out of the car and knocked on the door. Her mother, Rita, answered almost immediately, her face softened but her eyes wary. "Emma," she said, stepping back to let her in. "We weren't expecting you." Emma walked in, her bag feeling as heavy as her thoughts. I needed to come. Can I stay for a while?" Rita looked at her, her lips pressed together. "Of course. But Emma, what's going on? Laura called, said she'd left. And you look lost." Emma looked down, her voice quiet. "I had a baby for Laura. It's complicated. Liam left, we got divorced. I don't know what to do now." Rita sighed, her hand touching Emma's shoulder. "Oh, my girl, why didn't you tell us? We would have helped." Emma shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I couldn't. I promised Laura. That was my vow. But now, I've lost everything." Rita hugged her, her voice soft but firm. "You haven't lost us. You'll always be our daughter. But you need time to figure things out. Go and make yourself comfortable. Your father and I are here." Emma nodded, her tears soaking into her mother's shoulder. She went into her old room, which had hardly changed since she was a child, the same flowery wallpaper, the same bed with its threadbare covers. She lay down, feeling the weariness wash over her. Her parents had accepted her, but their looks, their cautious questions, said they didn't understand how she had gotten to this point. Emma didn't blame them, she didn't understand. Meanwhile, Marcus was spending the evening with Caitlin in his office. They drank wine, discussed business, but the conversation quickly turned personal. Caitlin sat on the edge of his desk, her dress hiked up just above her knee, laughing at his jokes, her eyes sparkling. Marcus was in his element, he was king, and Caitlin was his new muse. Laura, Sophia, Emma, they were mistakes he would make right. He had already cut Emma out of his life, and Laura would soon be just a memory. Caitlin was his future young, obedient, ready to play by his rules. "You know how to make a day better," he said, pouring her more wine. Laura never understood how to really live. Caitlin smiled, her fingers brushing his arm. Laura didn't know what she was missing, but I know how to appreciate the good. Marcus laughed, his hand on her waist. He knew it was temporary, that Caitlin was just a way to forget his defeat, but right now it was what he needed. He pushed aside thoughts of Laura, of Sophia, of the trial that lay ahead. He was Marcus, and he always found a way. Emma woke up the next morning to the smell of pancakes wafting from the kitchen. She went downstairs, where her father, Tom, was reading the newspaper and her mother was setting plates on the table. They smiled at her, but their smiles were cautious, as if they were afraid to scare her away. Emma sat up, feeling like a stranger in the house that had once been her refuge. "We're glad you're here," Tom said, folding up the newspaper. "But Emma, we need to talk. What are you going to do next?" Emma looked at him, her voice weak. "I don't know. I can't think about it yet." Rita placed a plate of pancakes in front of her, her voice soft but firm. "You have to, honey. You gave Laura everything, but now you're free. You can start over. Find a job, a place, a purpose." Emma clutched her fork, her eyes filling with tears. "Free? I don't feel free. I lost Liam, Laura, Sophia. I don't even know who I am anymore." Tom reached out, touching her palm. "You're our daughter, and you're stronger than you think. But you need time. We're here to help." Emma nodded, but her heart was heavy. She knew her parents were right, but the thought of a new life terrified her. She was alone, homeless, without purpose, and Marcus's shadow still loomed on the horizon. She ate a few bites of pancakes, but they tasted bland. Her life was in shambles, and she didn't know where to start restoring it. That evening, she received another text from Laura. Marcus called, threatened. "The lawyer says we have a strong case. Don't worry, we'll handle it." Emma clutched the phone, feeling anger and fear mingle in her chest. Marcus had lost Laura and Sophia, but he had already found a new victim, a new game. Emma knew he wouldn't come for her, he didn't need her anymore. Emma sat on the porch of her parents' house, her hands wrapped around a mug of cold tea. The morning air was cool, and a light mist hung over the lawn where she had once played with Laura. It had been a month since she had left Laura's mansion, and her life seemed to have frozen in a strange emptiness. Her parents' house was a refuge, but not a home. Every corner reminded her of her childhood, of her vow, of how it had all gone wrong. She felt like a guest who had stayed too long, and the feeling weighed on her. Her parents, Rita and Tom, tried to be supportive, but their concern was cautious, as if they were afraid to hurt her. At breakfast, they asked about her plans, offered to help her find a job, but Emma was evasive, unable to collect her thoughts. She had lost Liam, Laura, Sophia, and now, without the oath that had defined her life, she didn't know who she was or what she wanted. Her body had recovered from the birth, but her soul was still wounded, and every day was a struggle with guilt and loneliness. This morning, Rita found her on the porch and sat down next to her hands folded in her lap. "You were awake again," she said, her voice soft but tinged with worry. "I heard you moving around in the night." Emma shrugged, looking at her mug. "I just can't turn my head off. I keep thinking about Laura, about Sophia, about Liam." Rita sighed, her hand touching Emma's shoulder. "You've done more for Laura than anyone ever could. But now you have to think about yourself. You can't live in the past, Emma." Emma looked up, her eyes red. "I know, but I don't know how. I've lost everything, Mom. I don't even know where to start." Rita looked at her, her face serious. "Start small. Get a job, start going out somewhere, the library, a cafe, anywhere. You can't sit here and drown in this. Your father and I love you, but we can't live your life for you." Emma nodded, but her heart sank. She knew her mother was right. but the thought of moving forward scared her. She was like a ship without sails, adrift at sea. "I'll try," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Rita squeezed her shoulder and stood up. "I'll make breakfast. Come down when you're ready." Emma stood on the porch, looking out. She pulled out her phone and opened the last text from Laura from a week ago. "We're settled. Sophia is growing. Lawyer says divorce is almost final. Thanks, Em." Emma didn't answer, not because she was angry, but because she didn't know what to say. Laura had started a new life, and Emma was stuck in the old one, and the gap between them was growing with each passing day. That afternoon, Emma forced herself to leave the house. She drove downtown to a small cafe where she and Liam had once enjoyed spending Sunday mornings. She ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching the people pass by. Her gaze fell on a couple walking along the sidewalk, a man and a woman, laughing, holding hands. Emma felt a pang, remembering how she and Liam had walked here, planning a future that would never come. She pulled out the notebook she'd brought with her and began writing not a plan, not a letter, just the thoughts that were swirling around in her head. "I don't know who I am anymore. I was a wife, a sister, a surrogate mother. But now I'm nobody. How do I find myself when everything that mattered is gone?" It was hard to write. The words felt awkward, but it was the first time in months that she tried to figure herself out. The waitress, a young woman with bright red hair, noticed her notebook and smiled. "Are you writing a book?" she asked, placing a fresh coffee in front of Emma. Emma shook her head, her lips twitching into a weak smile. "No, just trying to figure out what to do next." The waitress nodded, her eyes kind. "I did the same thing when I lost my job a couple of years ago. Just wrote down everything that was in my head. It helped. Maybe it will help you too." Emma looked at her, feeling a little warm. This was the first time she'd spoken to a stranger in a long time, and he reminded her that there was still a world beyond her pain. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Maybe it will help." The waitress left, and Emma returned to her notepad. She wrote a few more lines about Laura, about Sophia, about Marcus, about Liam. Each word felt like a small step, painful but necessary. She didn't know where this would lead, but for the first time in months, she felt like she might have a chance to start over. Emma returned to her parents' house that evening, her mood slightly better than in the morning. Tom was sitting in the living room reading a book, and Rita was cooking dinner. They looked at her as she entered, and their faces softened, as if they had noticed the change. "Have you been to town?" Tom asked, putting his book down. "How was it?" Emma shrugged, sitting down on the couch. "Fine. Just had some coffee, wrote a little. Nothing special." Rita walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "That's something. You came out. That's the first step. I'm proud of you, Emma." Emma nodded, but her smile was weak. "Thank you, but I still feel lost, and I miss Laura. I miss Sophia. Even Liam, even though I know he's not coming back." Tom looked at her, his voice firm but kind. "You've done more for Laura than anyone ever could, but you can't live for her, or for Sophia, or for Liam. You have to live for yourself." Emma clasped her hands, her eyes filling with tears. "I know, but it's so hard. I feel like everything I did was a mistake." Rita sat down next to her, her hand on Emma's shoulder. "Not a mistake. You gave Laura a family. It was your decision, and it was out of love. But you're free now, Emma, and you're stronger than you think." Emma shook her head, her voice hoarse. "I don't feel strong. I feel broken." Tom leaned forward, his eyes serious. "Broken things can be fixed. It'll take time, but you can do it. Mom and I are here to help." Emma nodded, her tears falling onto her lap. She wanted to believe them, but the pain was too fresh. She had lost so much, and the thought of starting over seemed impossible. But her parents' words, their love, their faith in her were like a thin thread she could hold on to. Later that evening, Emma lay in her old room, staring at the ceiling. Her phone was off. She didn't want to see messages from Laura, Didn't want to think about Marcus, who had probably forgotten about her. She took out her notebook and wrote another line. I don't know who I'll be, but I want to try. It wasn't a promise, not a plan, but simply a desire, the first in a long time. She closed the notebook and lay down, her eyes heavy. Sleep didn't come easily, but for the first time in months, she didn't feel completely crushed. Her parents were right, she needed time, baby steps, to find herself. Emma sat on the old sofa in her parents' living room, her fingers playing with the edge of the threadbare throw. Outside, the rain drizzled against the glass, the only sound that broke the silence of the house. Another month had passed since she'd moved in with her parents, and her life seemed frozen in a gray haze. She tried to move forward. She went to cafes, wrote in a notebook, even applied for a couple of positions at the local library and bookstore. But every step felt heavy, as if she were dragging an invisible weight behind her. Her thoughts kept returning to Laura, Sophia, Liam, and Marcus, and even though she tried not to drown in the past, it clung to her like wet sand. This morning she had received a letter from Liam, not a text, not a call, but an actual letter, delivered by post. It sat on the table in front of her, open but not yet fully read. His handwriting, neat and familiar, evoked a pain she thought she had already overcome. Emma, I'm moving to another state. Started a new job. I'm not angry, but I can't forget. I wish you happiness. Short, without accusations, but every word cut her like a knife. She knew Liam was gone forever, and it was her fault. She folded the letter and put it in a drawer, unable to read it again. Rita, her mother, came into the living room with a tray with 2 mugs of tea on it. She placed one in front of Emma and sat down next to her, her eyes full of worry. You haven't eaten again, she said, pointing to the untouched sandwich plate on the table. Emma, you need to look after yourself. Emma nodded, her voice quiet. I know, Mom. I don't want to. I'm trying, I really am. Rita sighed, her hand touching Emma's. We see how hard you try, but you can't live just to survive. You have to find something that gives you joy. Emma looked at her mother, her eyes filling with tears. I don't know how. I lost everything, Mom. Liam, Laura, Sophia. I don't even know who I am anymore. Rita squeezed her hand, her voice firm but gentle. You're Emma. You're our daughter. You're strong, even if you don't feel it. You've done incredible things for your sister, but your life is yours now. Find her. Emma nodded, but her mother's words seemed distant. She wanted to believe that she could start over, but the emptiness inside was too great. She stood up, muttering something about wanting to lie down, and went to her room. There she took out the notebook in which she wrote her thoughts and wrote, I want to be happy, but I don't know how. I want to be myself, but I don't know who that is. She closed the notebook, feeling the tears stinging her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She was tired of crying. That afternoon, her phone rang, and Emma jumped when she saw Laura's name on the screen. They hadn't spoken since Laura left, only exchanging the occasional text. Emma swallowed, her fingers shaking as she answered. Laura. Emma, hi. Laura's voice was tired but warm. How are you? Emma sat on the bed, her heart pounding. I'm fine, living with my parents. What about you? How's Sophia? Laura paused, then replied, Sophia is growing. She's smiling, you should see. We're fine, settled in a new place. The divorce is final, I got what I wanted. Marcus, he's not a problem anymore. Emma felt a slight sense of relief, but it was mixed with pain. I'm happy for you. I really am. Laura fell silent again, her voice growing quieter. Emma, I'm calling to tell you, you can't come to us. Not now, maybe never. Emma froze, her breathing stopped. What? Why? Laura sighed, her voice full of pain. You did everything for me. You gave me Sophia. But I can't see you near her. Not because I don't love you, but because you remind me of what we went through. About Marcus, about the pain, about your sacrifice. I need Sophia to grow up without it. And you need to live your own life, Emma. You need to change, to find yourself, before you can be a part of ours. Emma clutched the phone, her voice shaking. Laura, you're my sister. I gave you everything. How can you just cut me off? I'm not cutting you off, Laura said, her voice breaking. I love you, but I have to protect Sophia. And you're stuck in this vow, in this pain. You have to break free. Emma felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Free? Laura, I lost everything for you. Liam, my home, my life. And now you're telling me I can't even see Sophia. Laura began to cry, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry, Emma. I never meant for this to happen, but I can't help it. Please understand. Emma shook her head, though Laura couldn't see it. I don't understand, but I won't argue. Goodbye, Laura. She hung up, her hands shaking. The phone fell onto the bed, and Emma buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Laura, her sister, her only connection to Sophia, was now as distant as Liam. The oath that should have united them had torn everything she had. Emma stepped out onto the porch, ignoring the rain that soaked her hair and clothes. She stared into space, her thoughts chaotic. Laura was gone, taking Sophia and the last thread that connected Emma to her past. Liam was gone, starting a new life without her. Marcus had probably forgotten about her, lost in his new games. And Emma was left here, empty-handed and heartbroken, on her parents' doorstep. She remembered that day on the dock, when she had made her vow to Laura. She had been 10, full of love and determination, not realizing that her words would lead to this end. She had wanted to save her sister, but instead she had lost herself. Now she had to find a new Emma, not a wife, not a sister, not a surrogate mother, but simply a woman who could live on. Emma returned to the house, her clothes wet but not feeling the cold. She took out her notebook and wrote, I don't know how to be happy, but I'll try. For myself. It wasn't a promise, but an intention, fragile but real. She closed the notebook and lay down on the bed, looking at the ceiling. The rain pounded the windows, and Emma listened to it, feeling something inside her begin to change. This wasn't salvation, not a cure, just a first step, small, but her own. She knew the road would be long. Her parents had supported her, but they couldn't give her a purpose. Laura and Sophia were a part of her heart, but not her future. Liam was a memory she would carry forever, and Marcus was a shadow she had to leave behind. Emma closed her eyes, her breathing evened out. She was desperate, but in that despair there was a spark hope for redemption, for a new life she didn't yet know how to build. But she was willing to try. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.